$8.4 billion. Drained from American households. In 30 days. Not from a market crash. Not from a recession. Just from people filling up their gas tanks and paying what the pump said. That is the cost of 1 month of this energy price surge, according to a congressional analysis released this week. And I guarantee you most people watching this have no idea how wide the blast radius of that number actually is right now. Because it is not staying at the pump. It is hitting the restaurant your family stopped going to. It is showing up in the gig worker's paycheck that no longer covers the cost of the shift. It is sitting inside the housing market, the job market, and the credit card balance of people who were already operating on fumes before any of this started. Today we connect every single one of those dots. Let's start with the actual numbers because you need to see the full map, not just the headline. As of April 1, 2026, the national average for regular gasoline stands at $4.06 per gallon. That is the highest point since August 2022. State-level numbers make the picture worse. California is at $5.89 per gallon. Florida, where I am, just crossed $4.22. Oklahoma, the cheapest state in the country, is at $3.27 and still up 18.3% year over year. Now here is the number that is going to cause the real downstream damage: diesel. The national diesel average just crossed $5.43 per gallon. That is a 50.2% increase year over year. In Arizona, diesel is up 68.8% year over year. In Florida, 60.7%. Diesel powers every truck, train, and freight vehicle that moves goods from a warehouse to a store shelf. A 50% spike in diesel does not stay at the truck stop. It lands on your grocery receipt, your shipping confirmation, and the menu board at whatever restaurant you walk into next. Gas Buddy's head of petroleum analysis, Patrick DeHaan, described $4 per gallon as a psychological wall for consumers. Jeremy Siegel at Wisdom Tree called gasoline the most visible price in the economy because it is on a giant sign at every intersection in America. When it jumps, it hits psychology before any downstream effects even have time to arrive. And it could go higher. Macquarie Group, one of the largest financial firms in the world, warned this week that if this war extends into summer, crude oil could reach $200 per barrel. At that price, Macquarie estimates pump prices could hit $7 per gallon. We went from $2.98 to $4.06 in 30 days. One of the fastest monthly increases since October 1990. If that trajectory holds, $7 is not a worst-case scenario. It is a math problem. Restaurant sales have fallen every single week in March since this war started. Not one bad week. Every week. Consecutive. And the industry was already on its knees before the oil shock ever arrived. Here is what had already happened before this month. Since 2019, fast food menu prices have climbed at least 30%. A standard fast food meal today runs $12 to $18 per person depending on what you order and where. That is effectively the same price as a casual sit-down diner where a real person brings you a real plate of food. The entire reason fast food existed as a category was that it was not that. It was supposed to be the floor of affordability, not a pier of actual dining. And now the closures are making that permanent. Wendy's just announced it is shutting between 298 and 358 restaurants in the first half of 2026 alone. That is 5% to 6% of its entire U.S. footprint disappearing before July. Pizza Hut is closing 250 locations this year. Papa John's is pulling hundreds more off the map. Jack in the Box is cutting 150 to 200 underperforming locations. Subway has already closed over 1,600 locations in the past 4 years. Bahama Breeze is permanently shutting 14 more locations in April. Restaurant industry research firm BBI now estimates 15% of all U.S. restaurants could close in 2026. This is not a coincidence, and it is not just a gas story. These companies are being compressed from both ends. Sales are falling while their costs for food, energy, and diesel-dependent logistics are rising simultaneously. When you cannot grow revenue and cannot cut costs, you close the locations that are dragging down the system. The stock market already sees it. McDonald's is down 7% in the past month. Starbucks down 7%. Wendy's down 10%. Chipotle down 15%. Those are not small movements. Those are signals that institutional money has already moved its estimate for where these businesses are heading. Here is what I want you to take away from this. Fast food's entire identity was built on affordability. When a Big Mac costs $15 at some locations and a meal with a drink is $18 before you add delivery fees, the category's core promise has been broken. People are not making an economic comparison between McDonald's and Chipotle. They are comparing McDonald's delivery to cooking at home. And cooking at home is winning the comparison by a significant margin. That is why the traffic numbers are falling and why the closures keep coming. Let me walk you through exactly what it costs to order McDonald's delivery right now, because the math is something most people have not sat down and fully worked out. You place the order. First, there is the delivery fee. On top of that, a service charge that can be as high as 15% of your total order. Then there are menu markups already built into the app because the delivery platforms charge higher prices than the in-store menu. If your order falls below a minimum amount, you get hit with a small order fee ranging from $2 to $3.50. Then there is the tip, which scales with the order total. Real numbers from real orders people are posting right now. An $8.99 order landing at over $20 by checkout. A $5.29 order becoming $12.74 after all charges are applied. One customer reporting $8 in fees on a single delivery. The pattern across thousands of reports is consistent. Roughly a third of the total bill is fees, not food. And here is the part that is making people genuinely angry. Those $3 and $5 value meal deals that McDonald's has been heavily advertising. They apply in-store only. Order through the app and that promotion does not exist for you. Now I want to be fair. This is not a McDonald's exclusive problem. Every delivery app, DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, runs the same fee architecture. The problem is that McDonald's specifically marketed itself as the affordable choice. That was the whole story after the $15 Big Mac backlash. The $5 meal deal was their answer. But the answer only works if you go pick it up yourself. The convenience that most people want, the delivery, negates the value offer completely. The small order fee is the one that generates the most outrage because it punishes the exact behavior that defines fast food. You want one burger and a drink. You are not running a catering order. And the system charges you extra for that. Here is the honest takeaway for anyone listening. If you want McDonald's, go pick it up. Skip the app entirely for these orders. The fees alone are often worth more than the food you are buying. And if you are looking for a reason to cook more at home, the delivery math is giving you about 10 of them every time you look at the checkout screen. Here's the comparison I need you to sit with because I do not think the financial media is being direct enough about it. The 1973 oil embargo, the one that caused gas lines stretching around blocks, rationing, and significant inflation pressure, removed approximately 7% of global oil supply. The current restriction on the Strait of Hormuz removes approximately 20%. We are dealing with a supply shock that is nearly 3 times larger by that single measurement alone. And the response has been to release strategic reserves that will cover 20 days of global fuel needs. The EIA, the Federal Energy Information Agency, projects crude prices could push retail gas 60 to 70 cents per gallon higher in Q2 2026 relative to where we started the quarter. We already have $4.06 gas before that extra pressure is fully priced in. Now let us talk about what this does to the Federal Reserve, because this is where the trap snaps shut. In an inflationary environment, the normal response is to raise interest rates. Higher rates slow borrowing, slow spending, slow the economy, and bring prices down. But we were already in a slowing economy before this war started. Raising rates aggressively now would not just tap the brakes. It would yank the wheel. You crush lending, you crush business investment, you accelerate a slowdown that is already underway. On the other side, cut rates to protect growth and you add fuel to an inflation picture that was already getting worse. There is no clean play. This is the textbook definition of stagflation, the one scenario where the central bank is essentially out of tools. The global preview of where this goes is already playing out. Sri Lanka shifted to a 4-day work week. Governments across Asia and the Middle East are encouraging citizens to cut energy consumption. University closures in some nations. It looks like the early days of COVID lockdowns, except the driver this time is not public health. It is economics. The countries that feel this first are always the ones with the smallest buffer, no strategic reserves, heavy reliance on fuel subsidies, limited ability to absorb price shocks. But the buffer countries, including the United States, are burning through their reserves fast. And every day this war continues, the math on those reserves gets worse. Let me shift to housing, because the same economic pressure system that is destroying fast food budgets is reshaping the real estate market in ways that most people do not yet fully see. There are 5 major shifts happening in this market right now that affect you whether you rent, own, or are waiting to buy. Shift 1. Sellers are completely stuck. Only about 25% of Americans currently qualify to buy the medium-priced home in the United States. That one number explains almost everything about the current inventory situation. Listings are back to pre-pandemic levels in most markets, and sellers are not just competing against each other. They are competing against home builders who are already offering up to 30% price cuts, mortgage rate buydowns, and free upgrades just to get people to sign contracts. Right now, there are over 630,000 more sellers than buyers nationally. That figure was around 500,000 last quarter. It jumped 46% in a single quarter. The last time the seller surplus was anywhere near this size was 2008. Shift 2. A growing wave of sellers is becoming accidental landlords. About 2.1% of sellers who cannot get their price have converted their properties into rentals instead of taking a loss. Add that to a record pipeline of new apartment deliveries, households combining to share costs, and rising vacancies from unaffordability, and rental supply is surging. Rent growth has slowed to just 2.6% year over year, the smallest increase in over a decade. Significant markets are already seeing outright rent declines. Shift 3. Renters now have more leverage than they have had in 6 years. Where renters choose to live, how much they will accept, and which units they walk away from are now steering the entire housing market. When renting becomes $1,000 per month cheaper than owning the same type of property, no one is making a rational argument for buying. Every dollar rent declines widens that gap and makes selling harder for everyone sitting on an overpriced listing. Shift 4. Sellers waiting for the market to turn are in for a long wait. Some sellers genuinely cannot lower their price because this property is their retirement. That is a real and painful situation. But the math for buyers does not change because of a seller's personal need. Every month they hold at an unreachable price, the pool of qualified buyers shrinks further. Nothing about this economic environment is rebuilding buyer demand anytime soon. Shift 5. Mortgage delinquencies are accelerating faster than the headline number suggests. And that 5th shift is what we cover next. The headline mortgage delinquency number looks manageable. The breakdown by loan type tells a completely different story. As of Q4 2025, the FHA delinquency rate stands at 11.5%. That is the highest level since 2021. FHA loans serve first-time buyers, lower-income households, anyone who put down less than 20%. These are the borrowers who have the least margin when costs go up. The conventional mortgage delinquency rate for people with larger down payments and stronger credit sits at 1.8%. The gap between those two numbers is 6.5 times. 6.5 times more likely to be delinquent if you used an FHA loan versus a conventional one. For the lowest income quartile of borrowers specifically, 90-plus day delinquencies have risen from 0.5% to nearly 3% since 2021. That is a 6x increase at the most vulnerable end of the market. The New York Fed's Wilbert van der Klaauw put it directly this week: the deterioration is concentrated in lower income areas and in areas with declining home prices. Total household debt in America just hit $18.8 trillion, up $4.6 trillion since 2019. Mortgage balances alone are $13.17 trillion. Credit card balances just crossed $1.28 trillion. And Google searches for help with mortgage hit their highest recorded level ever. Higher than 2008. Those are not people who have already defaulted. Those are people who are still current but running numbers that are not working anymore. Now let me add the layer that is pushing even stable homeowners toward the edge: HOA fees. HOA communities now cover 85% of townhomes and condos and roughly 33% of single-family homes in America. These fees have been climbing so fast that the financial press started calling them the shadow mortgage. Because that is what they are. A second monthly payment with no cap, no refinancing option, and no negotiation with a lender who might work with you. In 2021, a Rochester couple budgeted $235 per month for HOA on their townhouse. By 2026, that fee is $385, a more than 60% increase. They were also hit with 2 special assessments totaling $3,000 in 2023. In South Florida, the average HOA is $617 per month, nearly 27% of a typical mortgage payment on top of that mortgage. The purchasing power impact is severe. Every $100 in monthly HOA dues reduces your effective buying power by roughly $16,000 on the purchase price. At $700 per month in fees, you lose $113,000 in purchasing power. In a market where 75% of Americans cannot qualify to buy the median home, that is not a side note. That is a primary reason the market is frozen. For over 2 decades, the American migration story had one direction. People left the cold Northeast and Midwest and moved south. Florida, Texas, Arizona. COVID turned that into a full sprint. Now the sprint is reversing. Miami lost 114,000 residents on a net domestic basis last year. Los Angeles, despite gaining 38,500 people through immigration, still posted a net loss of 131,000. New York City is down 2% in population since 2020 and has had more people leaving than arriving for 6 consecutive years. The U.S. population grew by just 0.5% last year, one of the slowest rates in modern history. Half of America's 50 largest metro areas lost more domestic residents than they gained in the past year. And the Sun Belt cities that gained the most during COVID are now losing the fastest: Miami, Austin, Nashville, Tampa. Where are those people going? Flyover country. The Midwest. States like Missouri, Indiana, and Wisconsin, states that were actively losing residents just 3 years ago, are now gaining them. The cities attracting the most attention include Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Grand Rapids, Columbus, Indianapolis, South Bend, and Albany. In Toledo and Cleveland, you can still find a house for around $200,000. In Rockford, Illinois, right near where I grew up, the median home price is $170,000 compared to over $300,000 in Chicago. Rockford just posted 10% year-over-year price growth, and the median price, even after that increase, is $187,000. The appeal is simple. You are exhausted from stretching every dollar in a city where housing alone is eating half your income, and somewhere else still has houses for $200,000. That calculus is not complicated. But the trade-offs are real, and I want to be direct about them. A lot of these cities have genuinely weak local economies. Storefronts that have been empty for 15 years with nothing taking their place. Your options if you move there are either a remote income significantly above local wages or a 3 to 4 hour daily commute into Chicago. And the deeper risk is the pattern that has repeated everywhere. Higher income remote workers flood in, prices follow, and the locals get priced out exactly the way Florida natives were priced out of their own state. My family still in Illinois is already telling me that housing there feels unaffordable to people who have lived their whole lives in the area and earn local wages. $187,000 sounds cheap from Miami. From the local wage perspective, it is already starting to slip away. The gig economy was the American safety net of the past 6 years. Lose your job, start driving within a week. Generate income on your own schedule. Pick up the slack when the traditional job market could not absorb you fast enough. That model is collapsing in 2026, and it is collapsing fast. Gas is up approximately $1 per gallon in a single month. For a driver running 200 miles per shift, that is the difference between ending the day with profit or ending it in the red. The platforms have responded. DoorDash announced $5 to $15 per week in extra mileage payments plus 10% cash back on gas through their debit card, which they claim equals $1.90 per gallon in effective savings. Uber is offering up to $1 per gallon through the Upside app, additional discounts at Shell, 15% off with the Uber debit card, and $5 to $15 in weekly mileage payments equaling an estimated $1.44 per gallon in savings. Lyft has parallel programs. Drivers are saying it does not move the needle on actual take-home pay in any meaningful way. And the market is saturated on top of it. In some cities, you are on a wait list just to start driving because so many people have already signed up for these platforms. More drivers, thinner margins, higher fuel costs on every trip. The gig economy was supposed to be what caught you. It is no longer catching people the way it once did. Now let me describe the real job market through a story better than any statistic can. A woman applied to over 500 jobs in the year after she was laid off. She did everything right. Updated resume. Worked every professional connection she had. Targeted roles matching her exact background, not career changes, just the same type of work she had been doing successfully for years. She heard back from roughly 25 employers. Made it to final round interviews multiple times. Received 0 offers. She was the primary earner for her household. No income meant immediate mortgage pressure. Her garage flooded during this period and cost thousands in repairs. Insurance covered part of it. She eventually launched a GoFundMe not for a medical emergency but just to cover basic monthly living expenses. 7 months later, she found a temporary contract role. Not permanent. Not a salary replacement. A bridge. Her observation, every role she applied to, she was either overqualified or underqualified. The hiring market has a perfect candidate in mind, and if you are not that candidate exactly, they leave the position open rather than train you or give you a shot. Meanwhile, everyone already employed absorbs the extra workload for no extra pay. The job market right now runs on exactly the same logic as the housing market. Both are frozen because neither side will compromise. Before the practical tips, let me point your attention north for 60 seconds because Canada is showing us the next chapter of this story in real time. New data released this week shows 49% of Canadians are carrying debt and living paycheck to paycheck. Over 58% report less disposable income than before. 51% now need a strict monthly budget just to cover basic expenses. 36% of Canadian credit card holders are carrying a balance every month, using credit to fill the gap between income and costs. The parallel to the United States is precise. Wages have not kept pace with inflation anywhere in the developed world. Debt has been normalized to the point where most people do not register it as alarming anymore. And the official story about how well the economy is doing has been so disconnected from lived experience for so long that people have simply stopped believing it. One person interviewed in the Canadian study said, "We are not getting raises, we are not getting promotions, and we cannot keep up." That sentence fits every American city I can name. Canada's mortgage system resets every 3 to 5 years. Borrowers who locked in at low rates are now refinancing at rates significantly higher, spiking monthly payments with no warning. The result is delinquencies rising fast, even among borrowers with good credit scores. America's 30-year fixed mortgage system does not create the same shock mechanism. But insurance costs, property taxes, HOA fees, and living costs are doing the same thing through a slower path. Now let me give you 4 practical things you can do today to reduce your gasoline costs. First, Gas Buddy. Free app, no account required, shows every nearby station with current pricing. Price differences between stations in the same city can exceed $1 per gallon. That is real money every fill-up. Second, Warehouse Club Gas. Costco gas runs roughly 20 cents below competitors on average. Their affiliated Visa card adds 5% cash back on fuel on top of that. If you already have the membership, there is no reason not to use it for gas. Third, a gas rewards credit card. Most major cards offer 3% to 5% cash back at the pump. Shell, BP, and ExxonMobil branded cards add pump discounts plus loyalty bonuses. Stack those with a loyalty program and you can regularly save 15 or more cents per gallon on a consistent basis. Fourth, the Kroger Fuel Points method. During 4x Points promotions, every $250 you spend on gift cards for stores you already shop at generates around 1,000 points, equal to roughly $1 off per gallon on your next fill-up. Requires advanced planning, but the highest return on this list. One final tool, Rakuten. Free browser extension that automatically finds cash back at hundreds of online retailers. I average around $50 per quarter from normal purchases. Up to $200 per year at zero extra effort. The bottom line on everything in today's video is this: prices go up like a rocket and come down like a feather. Every business that has already repriced upward is not reversing it because oil drops $10 a barrel. The structural damage this oil shock is doing to restaurant economics, gig work margins, housing affordability, and household budgets is not a temporary blip. It is the new base. What you control is your response. 6 months of reserves, minimum. 1 year if you can reach it. Fewer things, done better. Less debt, more margin. The people who execute on that right now are going to be standing on very different ground 1 year from today. Stay subscribed. This is moving fast.